Aloha and welcome to Werks. I wanted to go over a couple projects. I'm not going to do a step-by-step on these, and it's simply because I am running very short on time, and I promise you when I get to one that's fairly simple that we can walk through, at least maybe three episodes or three parts. I think that would be a good one to do. These other ones are pretty complex, and I think starting you guys out with something that's pretty complex might be a little intimidating, and I don't want to do that to you guys, especially for those who are just starting to do work on this. And chances are, the one I'm referring to is a Texas Longhorn. Chances are most people, number one, don't have one of those. And number two, if they have one, they're probably not going to want to rehandle it themselves as a first-time project. I think it's pretty cool for you guys to see the process like in pieces here and there. I do have some footage of me taking apart the Longhorn, and I have some footage of me working on the Longhorn a little bit. But more than anything, I'm going to do little snapshots here and there as the project progresses. That way you guys can go there step by step. And I have two projects on my bench. That way I can try to clear them out by, I don't know, I'm hoping within the next week. And while those are gluing, I'm hoping to move on to a few other like non-knife related projects that I have to get done. And I promised the individual that I'd try to get them done before the next couple weeks. And that's going to give me a good break from the monotony of knife work. And again, as an artist, I think Stephen with SJ Relics kind of touched on this. When we get stuck and we're doing those same things over and over and over and over again, it gets a little tiring. And a small little break, even if it's a week or a couple days, really helps you kind of reset mentally so you can get ready for the next projects. So with that being said, this is a Texas Longhorn that I pulled apart, and as you can see, I took the pins, flattened them, and I flushed them. I made them flush with the liners, and you can barely feel anything on them. And I got to rough this up before I glue on the liners. So that was going to be roughed up anyway. So we want to rough up the majority of that surface so it's not super smooth, because glue will be the only thing holding these liners on this Longhorn. And aside from having to pull it completely apart, that was probably the best way to deal with this. Otherwise I would have to take it completely apart, which I have no issue with, but I wanted to keep it as close to the original form as it was, because there was nothing functionally wrong with it, and I don't want to risk taking it apart in a very expensive knife. So with that, let me show you what I've done. So when you look at mastodon or mammoth bark, it does not, from the outside, look like something that's desirable as a handle material. So it looks like wood. It looks like a tree bark. And this is from the outside of the tusk. And this is a part of a mammoth tusk. And these pieces go on the outside of it as such. And they are the very outside layer of that. And they're very pretty material, especially if you can find a way to use them. They're extremely thin, so they come in at a tight curve, and to utilize them, you have to have something that is extremely thin. And the Texas Longhorn handles are very thin. However, within the realm of like tolerances, that's cutting that very close with that. So you have to almost be dead on, and on top of that, this isn't completely flat on the bottom. So if you flatten that completely, then you're left with even a less of a thick piece, so it's a lot thinner. So in order to utilize that, especially on a knife handle such as the size of a Longhorn, the adequate way to do that is to give you some assistance with some liners. And I have some PVC type knife liners that I like to use, and they polish up real well, and they're really forgiving with flexibility and with adhesion with glue. And I have not had one issue with them so far. They by far are a lot better to me than the G10 liners. The G10 liners kind of look like a little plasticky. These look less like plastic, and they have more of a, not as much of a luster, but less of a fake shine, like a plasticky shine. And that's why I like to use them, especially when I'm using natural materials like this. So this bark right here, this is before sanding it. I wanted to see how it would look if I took it and put it on a 400 grit piece of sandpaper. And this is the side that I hit it with the most. And of course you can see some of the other surfaces that I didn't really get over here. And as you can see, I did not do anything with that side right there. I did start breaking down a few pieces that I thought would work right. And of course, as you start cutting out pieces and you start sanding away, you start uncovering like unexpected things like cracks and voids and things that you just can't recover from, like this. So that was completely hidden under the surface. And that, when I was sanding on one end of this, a little bit chipped off, and a little bit when you're dealing and you're trying to utilize or save as much material as possible, that slight variance in that chip, it leaves that little bit on there that I'm not able to recover from. And had I had that one crack not been in place right here, I would have been able to use this piece. And that was my goal, was to use this piece right here. So as you can see, it's on that right there. And that would have been a good piece because it was a lot thicker. And I was able to get it almost mostly flattened out. But I wasn't able to salvage that for this project. However, this is a perfect scale for a smaller knife. And it's not wasted work. I mean, I have other pieces that I did that to in the past that are just sitting here waiting for the right project. So I'll find another set here, and it's probably most likely going to be this, where I try to mirror that so I have a nice flat surface and a nice piece of material ready for a smaller knife. And in all actuality, I think I got somebody that wants Mastodon handle knife, and I'll be able to utilize some of these materials. And the difference between the bark versus the interior part of Mastodon is a severe contrast in color. This is right under the bark, and that's going to be a real pretty color as well. And this is underneath. And the cool thing about Mastodon ivory is when you look at it like from this section, like from not the flat surface, but the cylindrical surface. Sorry, looks like somebody's getting pulled over, so that was fire. Hopefully, pray for everybody's safety. So if you look at the end of this, it's probably going to be a little hard to pick up But on the end of this, the one real distinct way that you can show or tell it's mammoth ivory or even elephant ivory is from that cross section, and you can see like almost like basket weave like looking material, and it almost looks like just checkering. It's cross hatching, and elephant ivory is kind of more a little tighter in angles. Mastodon's a little further out. Whereas when you're looking at like walrus ivory and you look at the end, there is no cross hatching. It is actually just like a spiral. And on the inside, they have the dentine, which is oftentimes referred to as either oatmeal or tapioca. And it is not as solid white as the outer pieces. And as you can see, this big male right here wore down the outside of his tusk over the years, and some of that dentine was showing on the inside of that tusk, or I'm sorry, on the outside of that tusk. So this was the outside of the tusk, and it wore down and it came to a tip. But that's one real distinct way you can check and see you know, if you're dealing with walrus ivory versus like mastodon. So back to the Texas Longhorn. Real cool knife. Kind of handles that, in my opinion, were not kind of matching with this knife. So what I ended up doing, this is Nate Calhoun's, of course, and I ended up getting this bark, and I got some that looked real nice. I sanded some of this. Of course, I'm going to sand it down more so it's smooth, and those bumps will go away. But the way that I made this a little more salvageable is I added that liner, as I was talking about earlier. And that liner, it gives it a real cool, distinct look. And it also elevates it a little bit above, and it gives it about a 1/16 of an inch more thickness. And that's all I was needing to make these work in the manner that I wanted them to. And so I got them shaped, and I got them shaped and contoured to the outside where the locking bars are. And then I concaved and marked the areas for the lock bars. So there's those little divots, these right here. So I did this, I made this area flush to the top, and then I took care of these on both sides. And what I was left with and looking, so this is prior to glue up. It looks like this. So you can see it's proud of that surface, and I'm going to sand that down. And I know it's hard to see in the camera, but there is enough there to take that down. And if anything is left on that surface by the time I make that flush with the bolsters, then it's going to stay. I mean, that adds character to that, and it kind of makes it a little more recognizable as mastodon. But when I get further down past that dark brown, this lighter color is what color is going to be left. And as you can see, there's those gray PVC liners right there. And I think that they don't like jump out, and they're not like obscene and like, oh my God, you know, you're taking away from the beauty of that handle. It's kind of just accenting it. And it actually does more than just raise it up. So one thing that you want to do, and I attached these with heavy and thick CA glue, and I let it set slowly. What that does is it completely seals up the pores where I sanded off, and it seals it from air. And the way that you seal any kind of ivory is not with epoxy, it is with CA glue. That's a recommended way to do it. And oftentimes when I'm done, getting close to done, right before my final sanding and polish on any ivory, I'll take thin CA glue and wipe it across the top of the ivory to seal up those for that reason. So it lessens the chance of it warping or shrinking away from the bolsters. You know, it's natural material and there's very little I can do about that. It's going to happen no matter how good somebody is. You get warping of ivory. And if you work ivory before it's too ready, you get the chance and the potential for some kind of rough things to happen that are really hard to recover from. And sometimes they require you to completely scrap a project or redo a project even after time has passed. And hopefully, you know, if you purchase some, hopefully you got, that didn't happen. And if the project or the knife or whatever you did with that, it's not ruined and you can salvage it somehow. I know with some bone, you can heat up that bone gently and you can squeeze it back into place and it will kind of straighten out a little bit. A lot of times with like horn, you can heat it up with air or with water, with the heat gun or water or even fire, holding it above a fire and getting that open flame on there. And you can end up straightening it out. I'm actually going to try to do that here with my next project, so I can utilize some horn on one of the knives that I'm doing for one of the guys who I made a trade with. So I'm sorry, I'm trying to get some tape off of this knife. And if you recall, my younger brother, the middle brother, right? Yeah, be the middle brother. My younger brother, and I guess they're both my younger brothers, but he asked me to work on a knife that our youngest brother had made him, and there was some, I guess, flaws that he wanted smoothed out, and it had a lot of hot spots. And you know, my younger brother has no power tools or anything. It was all done with file work, and it is what it is. It's just that when you don't have a lot of tools, you're kind of left with either using sandpaper and sitting there for hours and hours. And I think he did that, at least with the ivory. But, you know, using sandpaper, hand sanding metal, a lot of times is not a lot of fun. And I know, living out in Bush, Alaska, I know living in my home community, the store there does not sell a lot of hardware materials in the form of like working on knives, even with ivory. Even sandpaper, they don't sell a lot of it. So I'm trying to take off this tape, and it's an absolute pain. It's masking tape, and I'm not sure why this tape is just, I think some of the epoxy got under it. But I guess what I was getting at is, so I taped this up pretty good because it had some gaps. The ivory started cupping, and when it starts cupping, it starts putting stress, especially on the thinnest parts of the ivory. And I know this from experience because I've made a few of these in the past, and I thought that I was working with some pretty stabilized ivory, and I wasn't. And what ended up happening was the ivory cracked at the thinnest point. And there's really nothing you can do about it. I mean, it's not the fault of the artist unless they purposely or knew that they were using a material that was not as stable as it could have been. And you can see the forming of a crack right there. And I'm hoping that's superficial. I want to sand that. I don't think it is. I think it's actually starting to crack right there. And as you could see, that's kind of where it was gapping the most between the metal and the ivory. And what I did was I colored some epoxy and I poured it in, and it's solid on the backside where it was sitting like this. But the top part, I can get my fingernail in there. So I'm gonna have to clean that up a little bit and add more epoxy on the top and let that set so it seals that up so nothing gets in there, and it seals up that ivory as best as it could. And then I'm gonna sand this, and I'm going to, my brother he likes the contour of this, so I'm gonna leave it alone. I offered to fix it a little. I already knocked down the hot spots, at least in the back. I gotta knock down the hot spots here and here, and I'm gonna leave that blade shape alone. And you know, it is comfortable. So my purposes of this is try to stabilize this so it doesn't break or get worse. So that's an example of what happens when you possibly don't use a liner or you don't use some kind of glue to prevent the moisture and the air from getting in there or out of there, and you end up with material like wood that just moves. And you know, when it shrinks, it kind of shrinks, and it wants to shrink like this, and it bows up. And that's a lot of pressure to be putting, especially when you're using metal pins, and the metal pins aren't going to give. So recap, this is pretty close to getting glued up. I plugged the holes with either the brass or with a little bit of CA glue. And I want to be able to tape off the lock bars, and I want to put something along here. I might take silicone or something that I can easily peel up and away from there. Even hot glue, you know, put it right here and seal the area off before I put epoxy, because I don't want epoxy getting anywhere in those lock bars, because that won't be fun. But as you can see, when I hold this up, the gapping on that, there's none there, you know, between the liners and the scales or the handles. And once I get them glued up, I can easily clean up this side. I'll flush this side with that bottom. I'll open the blades and get in there with my 2x72 and clean it up. And then I'll start contouring it, which means really just taking off this top layer and making it flow in line with the bolsters. And this one, I mean, after I do that, after I get the glue up and it's dry, as long as I execute that properly, this will finish up pretty quick. So Nate's probably gonna have that sooner rather than later. So another project I was working on, and I showed a little bit of it on Saturday when Mark was here, is a fixed blade knife. And some of the blue dicum came off. I sprayed blue dicum on here, and these two holes existed. This one, and I said I was going to leave that for a lanyard hole, and this one, which I wasn't going to utilize, at least for a through pin, because I just thought it was in a bad place. I guess if you just use this and this, it would look okay, but I didn't want to do that, so I ended up marking off, and I drilled 4 1/8" pins. And after I rough this surface up, I'm going to glue handles on, and these are a lot thicker than they're going to end up to be, but you know, essentially I'm going to contour the back, and the middle will swell up, so you'll still see some of that stag, and it will flow a lot nicer than this. But this is moose stag, and as you can see, it has those same liners on there. And I did this because the person I'm making this for requested it. He asked if I had it, he would like to have them. And, you know, I had them, so I'm going to use them. One of the things when you're drilling like holes, like I made this lanyard hole on there, if you try and you're holding this in place, and even if you clamp that on there and you're using a hand drill, and you're trying to drill through here, you're probably going to cant one way or another, and that hole won't line up. And when you put that tube in, it won't work, it won't fit, and you'll knock your glue out of place. So you have to find a way to drill straight down. And I was watching something, and it gave me the idea to make my own little jig to drill straight down through here. And obviously the way to do that is to drill from here to here, and you need to be able to make sure that this is parallel with the surface that you're setting it on, so it drills straight down. Or you can take this parallel surface and suspend it to another parallel surface, which is what I chose to do. And I have some aluminum channel here, and there's some holes drilled on top. And basically what you do is you line that up with one of the holes there, and you clamp this in place. And I utilize these big, can't twist clamps. And I clamp it from the back, from over here. And if it's a hole that I need to drill through here, I will. Or if it's like further back on the knife tang like this, then I'll stick that portion out and then I'll clamp it right here. But this is flat, and the surface on the drill press is flat, and it allows you to drill a flat or a hole straight down. And of course, you just need to make sure that, just like a carpenter, you measure twice, right? Measure twice, drill once. And you got to make sure that everything's lined up before you drill that hole. And, marking, I use double-sided tape, so I'll secure this to this with double-sided tape, get it on there, get it exactly where I want it to be, and then all I have to worry about is just clamping it and then bringing it over and drilling it. Drilling all the holes, actually, or not all the holes, these holes, because I'm not going to drill the 1/8" holes till this handle is kind of shaped. At least I want to know where the contours are, because I don't want the pins sticking like right on an edge. And if I drill the holes I guess I could drill the holes and then start contouring them to that, but then I don't want that to dictate the shape of it. I want what I'm doing, not only the aesthetics, but the feel of the knife to be what guides where this handle is going to go. And then after you do one side, you take off that tape. Then you get, you leave it on there. Then you get some double-sided tape, and then you put the other piece on and make sure it's flush with the top up here, because you don't want uneven tangs. Then you stick it down in place, and while it's stuck down in place, you pull off the other side, and then you have an area where you can drill the hole on this. So with this, I chose not to make that a useless hole, and I wanted to make sure that I use that for something, and I used it for a locking pin. So what I ended up doing was I ended up drilling a hole, and that's a 5/32 hole, and I have a 5/32 pin, and this is a 5/16 5/16 tube, and I drilled a 5/16 hole on the back end for the lanyard. And I also drilled these 1/8" holes, which will be 1/8" pins, and I'll round those pins off when I'm done with a head spinner. And initially I wanted to do a little more to this knife. I wanted to add a little bit of an ivory accent, but because of time crunch, I'm not going to be able to do that. So it'll look great the way it is, and I'll find some other way to accent it, I guarantee it. But this is a locking pin, so the way this works is I spun this pin down, and I spun this tube down on the 2x72 on a drill. And you gotta be careful with these. Don't use a drill to tighten down. Use your hand to tighten down on a tube, or you'll crush it. And I actually went back and forth and made these a lot smaller in diameter. What I mean by a lot smaller is not just where they fit. They actually go in, and there's some wiggle room there. And that's because you want some glue in between the metal and the Stag. If it's too tight, you won't get any glue in there or not enough. And I guess you can do a friction fit at that point, but I want to be able to glue these because the pins are going to be what the glue, the epoxy, and the 1/8 inch pins are going to be a double, I guess, double insurance that it stays in place. So you have a mechanical hold and you have a chemical hold. The chemical hold being the glue, which for a hunting knife, it's something you absolutely need. And Nate, don't take this the wrong way, but I guarantee you're not going to bring this out hunting. But if you do, it'll hold up, at least for the most part. I wouldn't put it through what we typically would put a hunting knife through. And this, in my mind, when I make a handle for a knife or I make a knife, my whole goal is to make sure at least it doesn't fail at that in that aspect. Now, I want to give a disclaimer if you guys didn't watch that other video. I did not make this knife. This was sent to me, and I was asked to rehandle this, and he liked this blade shape. It's a little rough, as you can see, but I'm going to fix that after I get those handles on, and I'll contour that up here. This thing is sharp. I mean, I got myself with the heel of it right here, and, you know, usually I'm wearing my gloves, and yes, Herb, I got to throw those away. I'll throw them away tonight, and I'll get a new pair. You know, I force a habit to wear things or to keep things until I absolutely can't use them anymore. And it's I'm sorry, it's the poverty in me, I guess. You know, growing up with no money and growing up in the village, you absolutely stretched anything you have as far as you could, and you know, gloves were no exception. And even though I got a drawer that has probably about 3 or 4 more pairs of those, for some reason, even though I can run down to the store tomorrow, my mind goes back to the squirrel or the chipmunk mentality, where I'm trying to hoard things in case something happens. That did pay off during COVID. But any other time, not so much here in Anchorage. I mean, realistically, almost every single main thing that I could go and run to the store for, I could get. There's certain like knife making supplies that they just don't sell here. And there's certain other things that are like not the quality I want that's locally sold, so I have to order it. But with that being said, back to the knife. So when I'm going to take this and I want to contour the handles, and I'll show you how I do this. I know I'm blocking the camera, I'm sorry. So I'm going to take a little bit of 2-sided tape and I'm going to put it right on here and tear it. Then I'm going to, you know, this is pretty dirty from that other 2-sided tape, and because I want as flat of a surface as I possibly can have her clean, I'm going to take, and I got to show you guys this. I talk about it all the time, but, you know, when I clean up my bench and I'm not embarrassed to show you what's underneath the camera, I'll show it to you guys. So that cleaned it off pretty quick. So I'll take that 2-sided tape. And this stuff is great. If you don't have this 2-sided tape in your shop, man, I recommend you guys have get some 2-sided tape. A lot of people complain about how hard it is to get that corner lifted up there, but if you sit there and you push that against the material that you're working, and you just take your fingernail and kind of pull down a little bit, it generally gives way pretty easy. And you don't have to worry about anything. I don't know why people get so dramatic on other, you know, like woodworking videos about how hard this is, but whatever. So take the tube, and as you can see, it goes in. And if you have a hard time assembling this prior to you putting glue on there, get ready for a nightmare when you put glue on this and you try to get it when you have the added thickness of the glue, creating more of a vacuum or a friction when you're putting these together. It's not fun. And I'll point you to all those people on Forge and Fire that sit there and try to force things together and start hitting things with hammers and their handles break and everything. Is because they didn't do a proper pre-fit to anything, to the material when they're doing it. And I'm sure that has to do with the pressure that they were dealing with at that point in time. But so I get it on there and I press it and I line it up with that locking pin. And I'm going to sit there and there it locks in. You can see that went into place. I got the tube right here. So this one right here, I'm going to take and I'm going to just line that up, get that hole, which I conveniently covered with the two-sided tape. So I'm going to line it up with that hole. It's lined up, and I'm going to squeeze that together. So right now, this handle is not like permanent, but it's like to the point where I can contour this and be able to take it off to make sure I'm able to sand and finish up all those pieces. And I mean, that's, I think, the start of a really cool handle. And it is a monster of a antler. Maybe a little thicker than I should have started, but I wanted him to have a nice piece. And it does feel nice in the hand. It's a little heavy. And it's going to go on a little bit of a diet, or a pretty big diet here on my 2x72. And you know, I'm not going to go to town. I want to be able to keep like at least this portion right here. And because I want to make sure I do that, is I'll probably mark it with a marker. I do have darker pencils, and I have, and here's another tool I recommend. If you guys don't have any of these fast cap, they're long-nosed pattern markers. These things are fantastic, and the only one I use probably more than this is this Pika ink, and it's blue. And this thing is just fantastic. And the problem with these, though, they're permanent marker, and you know, if you're not careful and you put permanent marker like on a porous material like antler, it kind of soaks into there and you have a blue hue to it. So I don't generally like to use these for that. So I'll take and I'll use a pencil, and I have this little fat pencil, and this thing makes some pretty good marks, at least where I can see them, where I get a general idea of where I don't want to be taking off Stag. So if I have a visual of that and I'm sanding, I know that I'm not going to take that off right there. What I even might do is try to leave some of that up towards the back so it comes in, and it comes in like this, and it will come up, and then it will come up to a little bit of a palm swell right here and kind of flare out just a little bit in the back. So I might lose the Stag in the back, but my intention is to keep some of it on there, and then I might even put some grooves in there, and I'm going to toast it. But bottom line, this thing is going to look great, and this is such a dense antler. It's towards the base. This thing is, when I sand it, it's almost like ivory, and that thing will polish out, and you can see that dark in there, and that's going to look like Appaloosa bone. If it stays like that, which I think it will, and that's going to look super cool. So you'll have that like Appaloosa bone look with a piece of Stag, and the Stag will be toasted, and moose really likes to toast very well. It almost gets a golden hue. So those are the two that I'm working on, and I'm not going to glue this up tonight because, like I said, I want to figure out a way to make sure I safely guard those lock bars before I do glue it. And once I glue it, I'll let it set for a day, and then I'll go in and I'll sand it. So, you know, I don't like to give myself time frames because life happens. I mean, work, life, you know, home life, I could get sick. One of my family can get sick. So, I mean, I'm getting close, and I'm hoping to get at least these done fairly soon. And then I got one other one I'm working on that's in similar fashion to this, and it's a surprise, so I'm not going to show it on camera. And then the other one I'm working on, or I got 3 others I'm working on right after this, and I got 2 more on the way. So I'm getting them done. It's just, and I'm actually getting them done a lot quicker than I told the individuals I would. And, you know, that's okay. And, you know, in looking at this, I put those upside down. I was watching the camera more than I was watching what I was doing. And because this glue is so like strong, I'm not going to be able to reuse it. And the way that you get it off is usually by twisting it. And because that lock pin's in there, there's no way where you can twist it to get that off. So the way that I get it off is I'll take, you know, one of my favorite tools. And, you know, I'm a creature of habit. This $2.99, it's not anything new. It's tried and true. It's been there forever. It actually has a crack up there, and it's starting to give way a little bit. So I got to buy another one of these, or hopefully find one at a garage sale. Because this just feels good to me when I use it. And if something feels good and you're used to using it, it's hard to switch gears. I have the new Milwaukee one. I have a Fiskars one, which is probably my second favorite one. And, you know, I got a few others, but by far, these Stanley's $2.99s are my favorite safety utility knives to use. So I'm just sliding this utility knife in between the double-sided tape and the lock pin on both sides. So if I can clear that lock pin, then I can twist it. And another way I guess I could do this is I can knock out this pin, this tube in the back. But I don't want to, I want to avoid like a lot of pressure on that, because those tubes can bend really easy. And if you bend the tube, then you've got to use another one. And I don't like doing that because brass tubing is expensive. Even grabbing it like that, it worries me because, yep, I even doing that, I flatten that, and lucky that's sticking out. So I'll just make sure I don't grab any other end with that. So now that that's out, I can twist it. And as you can see, it twists out pretty easy. And the double-sided tape comes off, and it doesn't leave sticky residue, at least on metal. It will leave a little bit of sticky residue on like ivory and antler and things like that. So you got to make sure that you clean that off. So I don't need to assemble that tonight. I'm going to work on it tomorrow. But I do need to find that pin, or I'm going to spend an extra 10 minutes making another one. So here I thought it's going to be a quick video talking about a couple of projects, not really showing much of anything in the way of work, but I think, and I hope walking you guys through some of this process and showing you some of the tools at least helps you guys get a general idea of what I'm doing and how I do certain things. You guys, I mean, watching me drill the holes after I showed you or explained how to do that, you know, that to me, that's something I can do later. Or you guys, the concept is there, and it's a pretty easy concept, really cheap tool to make, a jig, I'm sorry. You buy these at any metal store or scrap yard and drill some holes on the top, and you got something you can drill straight holes down in some odd shaped handles if you don't have squared off handles on the top. And when I deal primarily in natural materials, that was a must for me. So this is James. You guys have a wonderful evening. Stay warm, stay safe. Thank you.
He said, "Steal, hide, story, and soul work all get sharper in the dark. Warrior,